It's interesting to ask why it is that we're so oblivious to this data and these facts and the lived reality of people of color. And the only thing that I can conclude and have been able to conclude, because I still believe that the vast majority of white Americans are decent people. I don't believe that the vast majority of white Americans wake up seeking to oppress people, just like I don't think the vast majority of men wake up seeking to engage in institutional misogyny, but we are caught up in a system that encourages us to do just that, subsidizes that, encourages that, and makes that not only possible but very likely. But in spite of the fact that I think most people are good, in fact, maybe it's because I think most people are decent that we're in trouble, right? Because see, the problem is when you're a good person, and by that I mean a caring, compassionate person that doesn't want to hurt someone else, sometimes you have a hard time looking at the pain, right? Sometimes that's the very thing that makes it harder for you to deal with pain and injustice because you're so caring and you're so compassionate, you don't want to see the ugly, right? It's almost easier to look at the ugly when you're a sociopath. But for people who are caring and compassionate and not antisocial in their orientation, they are likely to look at the pain and go, oh my God, I don't want to dwell on that, right? Especially because if you're a good person and you look at the ugly too long, what do you have to do as a good person? Now you know you're morally obligated to do something about it. So it's almost like we turn away from it, not in spite of being good, but because we're mostly caring and compassionate. Sometimes nice, caring, compassionate, decent white liberal folk are the biggest problem of all, right? It's not the right-wingers who say they want their country back. They telegraph what they're looking at. They make it very clear what they're about, and they're a lot easier to fight because of it. But the folks who act like there's nothing wrong don't want to look at that. They don't want to look at the devastation, let alone get active fixing it. And the same is true with the justice system. So what I've come to realize is that the biggest problem with whiteness is not that it engenders bigotry and hatred and overt racism. I mean, you know, it might encourage that in some people, but for most people, we don't go down that road. What we do go down is the road of pure obliviousness to everything that's happening. Just this invisibility of what's happening. Now, it's a learned invisibility. Don't get me wrong. It's a cultivated ignorance. It's a cultivated obliviousness. I'm not saying we're innocent for it. I'm just saying, sort of like that movie, The Matrix, right? So if you've seen The Matrix, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you should. And you should watch it through a racial lens if you get a chance, because it's fascinating, right? In the film, there's this scene early on, sort of sets the tone for the film, where Lawrence Fishburne's character, Morpheus, offers Keanu Reeves' character, Neo, 2 pills. One is red, one is blue, right? And he says, you can take the blue pill if you want. You can go back to sleep. I'm paraphrasing here, but it's basically the gist of it. You can go back to sleep. That's what everybody else is doing. They don't want to see it. In fact, they don't want to see it so badly, they're willing to die not to have to look at it. So you can take the pill, and you don't have to know what's going on. You can go back to sleep and be oblivious to everything that's going on around you, just like everyone else. Or you can take the red pill and have enlightenment, and I can take you down the rabbit hole, and I can show you just how deep it goes, and you'll be able to see all these things that everyone else is missing. And of course, Neo takes the red pill, and he begins to see all of these things. It's almost like a perfect analogy for how we address race in this country. For those of us who are members of the dominant group, for those of us called white in a system of white supremacy, it's as if we are taking the blue pill all the time. Maybe don't even know we're taking it, man. Walking around with a blue pill IV drip sticking out of our veins. Like schlepping around that IV tube. Don't even know, like, what the hell is that? I don't know why I got this tube. What is that blue shit going through the tube? I don't even know what that is. And people of color are like, don't you see all this? Don't you see the racism? They're like, no, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And people of color are like, red pill, take the damn red pill. We're like, no, we're on the blue. I like the blue, see? And this is true in other binaries as well, right? I mean, men have the luxury of taking the blue pill, and I know it means different things in the modern era to say that, right? I know, right? See? Everybody gets that joke. That's how good Pfizer is with their marketing, man. That is capitalism right there. That is straight up capitalist manipulation of your consciousness. But in any event, men have the luxury of taking that matrix blue pill with regard to sexism and patriarchy, rape culture, misogyny. Straight folk and cisgendered folk have the luxury of taking the blue pill and going back to sleep on straight supremacy, heteronormativity, transphobia, etc. Right? Those of us with money, we have the luxury of ignoring the poor and the lives of poor people because we're on the blue pill, they're on the red. They got to see the class system because it's killing them. Those of us who are able-bodied, we have the luxury of sleeping on how our disabled brothers and sisters experience life. We don't have to take the red pill that they got to take just to figure out how to navigate the spaces within which they find themselves and the day-to-day routine of school or work or what have you, right? This is the luxury and also the horror of being the dominant group. Is that when you're the dominant group, even if you're infinitely good in terms of your intentionality and in terms of your ethics, your morals, your human decency, you have the incredibly great likelihood of going to sleep on what other people have to see and being convinced that it isn't happening. But let's ask ourselves, what are the odds that the people who have to see the system in order to survive it are misinterpreting their own lives? What are the odds that the people who have to see the things that are happening beyond the obvious and behind the curtain, so to speak, are misinterpreting their lives? And what are the odds that those of us who have the luxury of the blue pill and go into sleep in spite of that are able to see those other folks' lives more clearly than they themselves see their lives? I would say that's very, very unlikely. In fact, to suggest such a thing is to denigrate the intelligence of those who are being marginalized. It is to say, I know your reality better than you know your reality, so trust me and not your lying eyes. I'm not sure what we could say that would be more racist than that, or sexist than that, or straight supremacist than that, or classist than that, or ableist than that. To say as a member of a dominant group, I know you better than you know you, is to say that you're either too emotional, too overwrought, too irrational, too unintelligent to even interpret your basic daily reality. We ought to be offended by that in general, but when we add this to the mix, right, that becomes an oppressive stance.